दिले नादा तुझे हुआ क्या है, आखिर इस दर्द की दवा क्या है? Oh naive heart, what has happened to you? After all, what is the cure for this infliction? हम हैं मुश्ताक और वो बेजार, या इलाही ये माजरा क्या है? I want her so badly and she is so indifferent. हम हैं मुश्ताक और वो बेजार, या इलाही ये माजरा क्या है?
The poetry of Mirza Ghalib, the greatest Urdu poet of all time. He lived from 1797 to 1869 and wrote poetry in Urdu and Persian. His ghazals or poems on love in Urdu are recited, sung and performed all over India and South Asia today. His poems are simple but very profound. His verse is witty but very passionate. He wrote on several subjects, especially love, philosophy and God. Dr. Saif Mahmood is an expert on Urdu poetry. He is the founder of the South Asian Alliance for Literature, Art and Culture. And in this show, he's going to show us why it's so easy to fall in love with Mirza Ghalib's poetry. You're watching Our Talk with me, Jujhar Singh.
कहाँ मैं खाने का दरवाज़ा गालिब और कहाँ वाइज़, पर इतना जानते हैं कल वो जाता था कि हम निकले. Whither the tavern gate, the gate of the pub, Ghalib, and where the preacher? But all I know is that last night while I was coming out, he was tiptoeing inside.
Sehbhai, you're a passionate lover of Urdu poetry.
I am. I am.
You're a Supreme Court lawyer, but you say that Urdu poetry is in your blood and your genes. How did it get into your blood and your genes?
Oh, well, I've had a rather interesting history with Urdu poetry. You know, my mother belongs to the family of Majaz Lakhnawi, who is called the Keats of Urdu poetry. And my father also belongs to a very illustrious family which has produced many an Urdu poet. So from the very beginning, from my childhood, we have had a Diwan-e Ghalib in every room for us. And that's how we talk to each other, you know, on the dining table. All the conversations are interspersed with verses, and especially of Ghalib.
I also believe that you recall most of Ghalib, Faiz and Iqbal by heart.
Yes, quite a bit actually, quite a bit of Ghalib. Ghalib, of course, is ingrained in, as you said, my DNA from childhood. But I have learned a lot of Faiz and Mir, etc. And yes, Iqbal.
Was Mirza Ghalib considered the greatest Urdu poet of all time?
He is considered the greatest Urdu poet of all time. And why?
Yes.
So I will try to answer that in a couplet. And it's not Ghalib's couplet. There used to be this very well-known humorist from Pakistan called Dilawar Figar. And he has made an attempt to answer why Ghalib is the most famous or the most well-known or the greatest Urdu poet ever. And it's a longish poem which ends with this, कि पहुंच गया है वो उस मंजिले तफक्कुर पर जहां दिमाग भी दिल की तरह धड़कता है. So he has reached that final destination of pensive thinking where even his mind beats like his heart. And therein I think lies the USP of Ghalib. His poetry pierces like a dagger through your heart.
Yes.
And at the same time a dagger that you would want your heart to be pierced with.
What's your favorite Ghalib couplet?
That's a very unfair question, I think. I don't think there's a favorite Ghalib question.
What is the one that inspires you?
The one that inspires me, is this. And I'm writing a book, and I've begun my book with this couplet. It says, Maqdoor ho to khak se पूछूं कि ए लईम. मकदूर हो तो खाक से पूछूं कि ए लईम तूने वो गंज हाय गरम आया क्या किए. If I were given an opportunity, I would ask the earth, oh miser, he's calling the earth miser. I would ask the earth, oh miser, what have you done to those precious treasures that we buried in you? So this is something that has actually inspired me a lot.
We'd be asking the opposite question now. What have we people done with the treasures that the earth has given us over the years?
Oh, yes, anybody's guess.
The environment.
Yes, yeah. Not only the environment, everything, even with heritage. Ghalib's Haveli, for instance, has been preserved.
In Old Delhi.
In Old Delhi, in Balli Maran.
Yeah, I've been there.
You've been there. Yeah. It's like something that has come out from the Arabian Nights. And you know, you'll be surprised to know that it was all illegally occupied by various people. It was pursuant to an order passed by the Delhi High Court that the government of Delhi, with the help of some others and the Aga Khan Foundation, restored it. Well, very applaudable, but you have done a ridiculous job restoring it. Ghalib was not, he didn't live in Arabian Nights. So this is what we have done.
There's a PCO booth there, by the way.
There's
you go to the first floor, you won't believe it.
Yes, there's a PCO booth, Ghalib. There's also a mosque next to his house. A mosque which exists from the time when Ghalib used to live there. You know, the thing about Ghalib is that Ghalib never owned a house in Delhi. He always lived in rented accommodations, and this is the last house Ghalib lived in Balli Maran, the one that has been preserved. Now, surprisingly, nobody knows which house Ghalib lived in before he shifted to this house. He lived in this house only for the last 10 or 12 years of his life. What about the other houses? Nobody knows. So this is what we have done to our heritage. This is what we have done to the precious treasures that we have buried in the earth.
Okay, let's talk about the precious treasure of Ghalib now.
Yes.
Like a lot of Urdu poets, he focused a lot on love and the anguish of love.
Oh yes, he did. He did. Ghalib was a hardcore lover, if I may say that. You know, one also needs to see his family history and his societal circumstances. Ghalib was married to Umrao Begum, who was the niece of the Nawab of Luharu, the same Luharu in Rajasthan now. And she was 11 when she got married. Ghalib was 13. And the woman obviously could not satisfy Ghalib's intellectual desire. By 19, by the way, Ghalib had written most of his important poetry when he was 19. The couple moved to Delhi when Ghalib was 15 and she was 12. But she couldn't satisfy Ghalib's intellectual desire. She bore him 5 or I think 7 children, all of who died either at childbirth or infancy. So he had a very estranged kind of a relationship with his wife. I wouldn't say it was a bad marriage in that sense.
But she was also considered a pious woman. He was considered a ladies' man.
Yeah, she was very pious, and with every death of every child, she became even more pious. And Ghalib wasn't, you know, unabashed agnostic, if not atheist. So the story goes that once Ghalib came back home and he asked for dinner. So she gave him dinner in a bowl which he had never seen earlier. So Ghalib asked her, कि बेगम आपने क्या हमारे बर्तन भी अलग कर दिए हैं? She replied, नहीं, हमने अपने बर्तन अलग कर लिए हैं. No, I have separated my, cutlery from yours. So yes, and Ghalib, therefore, Ghalib didn't find any love in his marriage. But
the disconnect was also because he was, as I said, a ladies' man, right?
I wouldn't say that the disconnect was because he was a ladies' man. It was perhaps the other way around. He was a ladies' man because he couldn't find anything at home. So there was a courtesan, a domni, called Nawab Jan, who was madly in love with Ghalib. Ghalib didn't know that till such time as he incidentally tiptoed into the area where her kotha was and heard somebody sing his ghazal. So then he went up and saw that there's this beautiful, gorgeous courtesan singing Ghalib's ghazal. She didn't know he was Ghalib. And he came back without telling her that he was Ghalib. But then Ghalib famously says कि जिस शेर को या जिस ghazal को कोठे पे तवाइफ और गली में फ़कीर गाए, उस शायर को तो कोई मात कर ही नहीं सकता. So if a courtesan is singing your poetry, or if a fakir on the street is reciting your poetry, then you have to be a great poet. It has reached beyond the scholars, and it has reached where it should reach.
I wonder if he used his poetry to woo his women.
Yes, I think not to really woo his women, I wouldn't use the word wooing his women, but yes, his poetry would have automatically wooed a lot of women.
Look at his love poetry.
I don't think he even needed to woo women, because somebody who would read his poetry would be totally smitten in any case. Dile nada tujhe hua kya hai? Akhir is dard ki dawa kya hai? Oh naive heart, what has happened to you? After all, what is the cure for this infliction? Hum hai mushtaq aur wo bezar. Ya ilahi, ye majra kya hai? I want her so badly and she is so indifferent. हम हैं मुश्ताक और वो बेजार. या इलाही ये माजरा क्या है? या ये देख लीजिए आपकी हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी.
Oh, one of his most famous poems.
One of his most famous. Even Dile Nada has been sung by at least 7 singers. And हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले. बहुत निकले मेरे अरमान, लेकिन फिर भी कम निकले. He's saying I have so many desires, so many thousands of desires. Hazaro khwahishein aisi, thousands of desires I have. कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले and each one of them is worth dying for. बहुत निकले मेरे अरमान लेकिन फिर भी कम निकले. Yes, many of them have been fulfilled, but still most of them have not been.
But you know, in Hindu philosophy, they say that if you go around fulfilling all your desires, you don't actually extinguish your desires, you actually strengthen them, create more of them.
And he did exactly that. जितने desires जो है, all the desires that went on being fulfilled, more desires, he started having more desires. That's what he did.
Another great one, मोहब्बत में नहीं है फर्क.
जीने और मरने का, मोहब्बत में नहीं है फर्क जीने और मरने का, उसी को देख कर जीते हैं जिस काफिर पे दम निकले. So what he's saying is, in love, there's no difference between life and death. I live looking at the same unfaithful one who I die for.
Look at the clever and witty wordplay over here.
Yes.
I live for the one I die for.
Yes, I live for the one I die for. That's what he's saying. And the wordplay is actually what is the USP of this शेर. उसी को देख कर जीते हैं जिस काफिर पे दम निकले. And you look at the word kafir. Kafir is an infidel, somebody who doesn't have faith in Islam. Kafir. So he's calling his beloved a kafir, the unfaithful. उसी को देख के जीते हैं जिस काफिर पे दम निकले.
The other interesting thing about Ghalib is that his poetry, especially in love, can often be self-deprecating.
Yes, of course, he has been self-deprecating. In the same time, he is also very, very concerned about his self-respect, and I'll give you examples of both. So there is this very famous ghazal, दिल ही तो है ना संगो खिश्त, दर्द से भरना आए क्यों, रोएंगे हम हजार बार कोई हमें रुलाए क्यों. It has been sung by almost every singer. In this ghazal there is a शेर, गालिब खस्ता के बगैर कौन से काम बंद हैं, गालिब खस्ता के बगैर कौन से काम बंद हैं, रोइए जार जार क्या, कीजिए हाय हाय क्यों. What worldly tasks will stop or have stopped in the absence of Ghalib? The world goes on whether I am there or not. Why cry bitterly then? Ghalib was just another being on this earth. This is being self-deprecating. And now, at the same time, Ghalib says, there's nobody better than me at love or at anything else actually. He claims to be the undisputed champion of love. Undisputed champion of love. कौन होता है हरीफे मैं मर्द अफगने इश्क है मुकर्रर लबे साकी पे सला मेरे बाद. Let me translate this for you. He is saying, who has the gall to drink the poison of love after I am gone? The bartender or the wine keeper keeps shouting and calling names. Is there anybody who keeps challenging people? Is there anybody who has the gall to drink the poison of love like Ghalib? It's like the wrestler. When he has defeated everybody else in a game of wrestling, then he takes a round of the wrestling arena and says, oh, is there anybody left? That's what Ghalib is saying. After me, is there anybody left who can actually drink this poison of love? So that kind of, high-headedness and self-respect.
Saif bhai, the ghazal is one of the main forms of Urdu poetry, and a ghazal, of course, consists of different couplets or shairs. Yes. Now, before Ghalib, a lot of Urdu poets basically focused on love or anguished love. Ghalib also started writing on philosophy and mysticism. Yeah. How much is Mirza Ghalib responsible for expanding the scope of Urdu poetry?
A lot, actually, a lot. Before him, Mir also did that, but Ghalib is responsible much more than Mir for expanding the scope of Urdu poetry and taking it out of the genre of only love poetry. He wrote an absolutely brilliant film. Ghalib ka ek sher hai. I'll just recite this couplet for you. Ghalib's own, he says this in his own couplet. Your question is actually answered by Ghalib in his own couplet. And he says, कि बक़दरे शौक़ नहीं ज़र्फ़े तंग नाए ग़ज़ल कुछ और चाहिए वुसत मेरे बयां के लिए. The narrow limits of the ghazal form are not enough to satisfy my desire. I need a vaster space to express myself. So what he's saying is not that the ghazal is a very, very narrow form of poetic expression, but that his desire, his philosophy is spread on such a wide canvas that it wouldn't fit in a ghazal. Now, let me give you an example of a philosophical couplet or a philosophical poem by Ghalib. इशरते क़तरा है दरिया में फना हो जाना. Unlike Mir, Ghalib finds material science on earth, He's metaphysical in his approach. इशरत कतरा है दरिया में फना हो जाना, दर्द का हद से गुजरना है दवा हो जाना. So the ecstasy of a drop is in getting obliterated in the river. When pain crosses its limits, it becomes a cure unto itself. Look at the philosophy behind this. Look at the philosophy behind this. And this is not romantic.
Another famous one, ना था कुछ तो खुदा था.
Oh yes. ना था कुछ तो खुदा था, कुछ ना होता तो खुदा होता, डुबोया मुझको होने ने, ना होता मैं तो क्या होता. This is his whole existential crisis here. कि ना था कुछ तो खुदा था. When there was nobody, still or nothing, still God existed. कुछ ना होता तो खुदा होता. If there was no one, if there were nothing, God would have still existed. डुबोया मुझको होने ने, ना होता मैं तो क्या होता. It is existence that has ruined me. This whole concept of existence, which has ruined me. If I were not born on this earth, or if I did not exist, what difference would it have made to anyone? So,
and that is so true.
That's so true.
And what's amazing is that an agnostic is writing this.
That an agnostic is saying this.
Yes.
And his religious beliefs, he never made any bones about his religious beliefs or the lack of his religious beliefs.
In fact, he mocked hypocrisy.
He mocked hypocrisy.
In religion, including the clergy.
Yes, including the clergy. He shifted to an accommodation, to a Haveli in Balli Maran, and finding a mosque next to his house, he was so flustered. He says, मस्जिद के ज़ेरे साया एक घर बना लिया है, ये बंदा है कमीना हमसाया है खुदा है. Next to the mosque, he has made his house. This despicable fellow about himself. This despicable fellow has now become a neighbor of God. He's talking about himself and about clergy. Ghalib says, कहाँ मैं खाने का दरवाज़ा गालिब और कहाँ वाइज. So as you know, in Islam, alcohol is prohibited. Or at least the clergy tell you that it's prohibited. So कहाँ मैं खाने का दरवाज़ा गालिब और कहाँ वाइज, पर इतना जानते हैं कल वो जाता था कि हम निकले. So he's saying that, whither the tavern door and whither the mullah, they are two poles apart. But what I only know is that while I was coming out of the tavern last night, the poor mullah was tiptoeing inside. कहाँ मैं खाने का दरवाज़ा गालिब और कहाँ वाइज.
See, this is Ghalib. I mean, he's so pointed, so sharp,
yes.
But at the same time so witty.
Yes. Very witty, extremely witty. So not only in poetry, but even in his general conversations with people, which, in my opinion, his conversations are also as much a part of the literary tradition of this country as much as poetry is.
I read this very funny story during the mutiny in 1857. British soldiers hauled him up in front of the British colonel.
Yes.
Yeah, you know that story.
Yes. And he was asked by the colonel, "Kya Musalman ho? Are you a Muslim?" He said, "Huzur, आधा मुसलमान हूँ. I'm only half a Muslim." When asked to explain, he said, "सुअर का गोश्त नहीं खाता, शराब पीता हूँ. I drink, but I don't eat pork." And the colonel was so amused, he let him go.
Mirza Ghalib lived in the 19th century. It was the last stages of the Mughal Empire. Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar II, in fact, gave him many titles as well. But I believe that Ghalib lived a very hard life.
He lived a very hard life. He was in debt all his life. And he fought for his ancestral pension against the British government all his life. He travelled all the way to Calcutta to fight for a proportionate share of that pension. Bahadur Shah Zafar actually gave him titles much, much later. As long as Zauq was alive, Ghalib की कोई ख़ास पूछ नहीं थी दरबार में. Bahadur Shah Zauq, because he had a rivalry with Zauq, and Zauq was the poet laureate and also the ustad of Bahadur Shah Zafar. So only after Zauq died was Ghalib called to the court. But you're right, Ghalib lived in penury all his life. He lived as a tenant. There's a couplet in which he alludes to this. So Ghalib used to borrow money from all kinds of money lenders to run his household and to buy his drinks. He would go all the way to Meerut cantonment to buy some particular, I think it's called Old Scott or something, a brand of rum. He would drink only that rum.
They did it even then.
It was even then. And so once a money lender sued Ghalib for money, and the case came up before a small causes court judge called Mufti Sadruddin Azurda, who was a great friend of Ghalib and a poet of great stature in his own right. So when Ghalib responded to the summons and appeared before the court, the Mufti asked him, "Ghalib, Mirza, did you take this money?" Ghalib replied in a couplet, and the couplet is this: "Qarz ki peete the main, और समझते थे कि हाँ रंग लावेगी हमारी फाका मस्ती एक दिन. I used to drink on borrowed money and used to think that my making merry in penury will someday pay me off. And the judge treated this share, कर्ज की पीते थे मैं, as an admission of liability and decreed the suit there and then, took out the money from his own pocket, paid the plaintiff, asked Ghalib to go back home. So these, those days
it
were
was
very
paying off for
paying
him.
off well. It did pay off well.
Saif bhai, what makes Urdu poetry so beautiful?
What makes Urdu poetry so beautiful is the tehzeeb of Urdu. Urdu poetry, I must point out, is not just love and romance. Urdu poetry has protest, it has feminism, it has philosophy, it has humor and satire and everything else that a rich language should have. But what is common, the common thread that runs through all these genres of Urdu poetry is what is called tehzeeb, the Urdu culture. Urdu is not the name of a language. It is the name of a complete culture. Urdu is a complete culture in itself. And you will see it in all kinds of poetry. From the classics, start from Sauda to Mir to Ghalib, and to the current poetry, the contemporary Urdu poetry.
And there's also great musicality to Urdu poetry.
In the ghazal, there is
people are singing and performing it all the time.
The ghazal is one of the most musical forms of poetry ever. Not only just Urdu poetry, it's one of the most musical forms of poetry ever.
You've translated a lot of Urdu poetry into English.
I have. I've translated. So I'm writing a book which is going to come out next year. In that book, I have the poetry of the classical Urdu poets of the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries. It's not a collection of poetry, but I've used a lot of poetry, and all of that I have translated myself. So all the classical Urdu poets, and then I've translated some of Faiz. I have translated Zehra Nigah, who is admittedly the greatest Urdu poet alive today.
You're a Supreme Court lawyer by profession, but an expert in Urdu poetry by passion. Which you enjoy more?
I think I enjoy both. My passion is poetry, but I don't do poetry in court. Likewise, I do not argue in poetry and literature. I enjoy both.
You could try it. Ghalib tried it.
Ghalib tried
and
it.
got away with it.
Ghalib tried it and got away with it. In fact, as I was saying, that Ghalib spent a lot of time litigating in courts.
I'll tell you what, why don't we take a little break at this point in time? When we come back, we'll talk about Ghalib, the litigant.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You would have been a great lawyer for him, by the way.
Had Ghalib been alive, I would just have been sitting by his feet, without learning any law.
We're talking about the absolute beauty of the poetry of the greatest Urdu poet, Mirza Ghalib, with Saif Mahmood. We'll be right back on our talk. Welcome back. You're watching Our Talk with me, Jujhar Singh. We're talking about the greatest Urdu poet, Mirza Ghalib, with Dr. Saif Mahmood. Saif bhai, you're a Supreme Court lawyer, you're an expert on Urdu poetry as well. You want to talk about Mirza Ghalib, the litigant as well, right?
Absolutely. Mirza Ghalib spent most of his life litigating, either as a plaintiff, because he was fighting for a reasonable share of the pension of his ancestors, or as an accused. He was arrested twice, once for gambling and once in a money lending case. And his experiences in court echo in his Urdu poetry. The Diwan-e-Ghalib is, by the way, this is the Diwan-e-Ghalib. I want to show this to you. This is the entire work of Ghalib, who is the greatest Urdu poet. So he hasn't written so much, but what he's written is absolutely so powerful that there's no other poet of this stature in Urdu literature. So the Diwan-e-Ghalib is full of legal terminology. There are words like sarishtedar and rubakar, etc. used in Diwan-e-Ghalib. A sarishtedar, for instance, or even adalat, court, summons, talab. Sarishtedar, court master. I'll give you an example. Dil muddai aur dida bana mudda alayh. Nazare ka muqaddama phir rubakar hai. Heart has become the plaintiff, and I, the defendant. The case of gazing is being called for hearing again. Look at how he uses legal terminology.
Incredible.
Look at this.
It's actually beautiful.
Yeah. So look what an indelible effect his being a litigant has made in his Urdu poetry.
Saif bhai, you've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.